Hello and welcome to another episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand, the podcast for all things marketing. In today's episode, we're going to talk about why Amazon Prime drives loyalty and charges for the privilege. We're also bringing back Rob Recommends with a couple of fascinating articles about one of the most important of the 4 Ps, pricing. We'll cover the idea of fictitious pricing and also whether discounting and price promotions are a sensible and sustainable strategy. Loyalty programs are somewhat of a contentious issue in today's marketing world. If you listen to Professor Byron Sharp, author of How Brands Grow, he'd probably tell you that while they may have a very mild effect, the money spent would be better off being put into building mental availability or physical availability and increasing penetration rather than trying to retain sales from your existing base. But there are plenty of advocates of programs too, and plenty of ways money can be made from loyalty programs. Look at the airlines and the way they sell miles to the likes of banks and credit card companies. So it doesn't always have to be about loyalty per se. However, one trend within loyalty over the last couple of years has been the idea of paid-for loyalty programs, of which the most famous is probably Amazon Prime. Now, if I ask the average person on the street to give me an example of a hugely successful loyalty program, I doubt they'd mention Amazon Prime. After all, it doesn't have the trappings of a stereotypical loyalty program. No points, no tiers, no rewards for transactional frequency or for spend. Yet, you should be in no doubt that it was intended to drive loyalty from its inception. Vijay Ravindran, who I hope I'm pronouncing correctly, former Amazon Director of Ordering, was at the original kickoff meeting for Prime in the autumn of 2004 and recalled the conversation with Jeff Bezos. The thing I remember very distinctly is this phrase: I want to draw a moat around our best customers. We're not going to take our best customers for granted. He said something along the lines of, I'm going to change the psychology of people not looking at the pennies differences between buying on Amazon versus buying somewhere else. And I think that completely changed the mentality. It was brilliant. It made Amazon the default. It seems to be doing that job for them too. According to the Future Shopper report, Amazon Prime members are twice as likely to start their searches on Amazon as those who don't have the service, so 85% versus 42%. They're more likely to spend more with Amazon. 1 in 4 Prime members direct more than half their online spend to Amazon. For non-members, it's 12%. And most of them believe it's good value for money, 65%, so 2/3 of them. Now, we need to be careful around those numbers because of self-selection. The customers most likely to join Prime are those most engaged with Amazon. But Amazon is a company built on testing and experimentation. They spend millions of dollars on Super Bowl TV spots promoting Prime, and it's plastered all over their delivery trucks, packaging and more. Given that, I'd wager Amazon know Prime is doing the job for which it was designed. But why does it do that job so well? Well, you can, and I have, distilled why Prime works into 3 elements that combine to make it successful. 1 is it's frictionless. 2nd, it's rewarding. 3rd is the entry price and the behavioural science behind paying to enter a program. So let's start with frictionless. To use an economic term, friction costs. In his book, Inside the Nudge Unit, David Halpern wrote, just as a real weight pushed across a real table will soon grind to a halt as a result of friction, a human impulse to do something soon grinds to a halt when it becomes a hassle. Amazon have taken this to heart and make it super easy to order and get your products when and where you want them. I'll leave it to comedian Ronnie Chang to paint a picture of this frictionless world.
50 million boxes flying across America at all times. The airspace above America is just Amazon Prime. Packaging just knocking into each other like satellite debris, right? More Prime. Can't get enough Prime here. We need it Prime. We need Prime harder, faster, stronger. Faster Prime. Prime now. Prime now. 2-hour delivery. Prime now. Give it to me now. When I press buy, put the item in my hand. Now. In America, there should be no lag. 0 lag between when I press the button and when the item is gently placed into my hand so I can use it now. Oh, same day delivery? Oh, un-American. Same day? Now. It's like, where do we go from here? As a civilization, like how much more convenience can we get? How much less energy can we use to get what we want? Let's get Prime before. Send it to me before I want it. It's 2019, I have to make a decision before you mail me what I buy. Use artificial intelligence to substitute my own intelligence so I can live my life. Send me everything I want before I want it, in as many boxes as possible.
The next one on the list was rewarding. The list of benefits Prime members receive is long and crucially priced well. We know people see pricing through a relative lens. To quote Dan Ariely from his book Predictably Irrational, humans rarely choose things in absolute terms. We don't have an internal value meter that tells us how much things are worth. Rather, we focus on the relative advantage of one thing over another and estimate value accordingly. So if you look at Prime Video just on its own, it stacks up next to Netflix from a cost perspective. And that's before everything else gets thrown in on top around delivery and music and goodness knows what else is part of Amazon Prime. The variety and depth of benefits also ensure that there are at least a couple of things that interest most people rather than relying on just one thing. And lastly, the entry price. This is super important. Whether an annual fee up front or monthly payment is crucial because it plays into the psychology of sunk costs. People react irrationally in relation to sunk costs. Fans who paid £100 for a concert ticket will drive into a blizzard to get to that concert, whereas fans who got tickets for free, for example, would think better of it. Paying £100 for a ticket and not attending feels like losing £100, even though the money's gone. There's nothing you can do to get it back. Similarly, the more you use something that you've paid for, the better you feel about the purchase. As a result, paying £79 for Prime, or however much it is these days, contributes to customers choosing Amazon over the competition. They want to get value out of that investment, or they see it as wasted money. And you can see that in the stats I mentioned earlier about where people start their searches. People are defaulting to Amazon. So the bottom line here is that Amazon identified the idea of engendering a form of loyalty as a business benefit and came at the problem in a really interesting way. They created a hugely valuable proposition for which they could then justify a price, which mentally locked in some customers. And as with most things Amazon, other retailers have jumped on the bandwagon. At Game, the UK video game retailer, the Elite program was launched and has had a really positive impact. Lululemon tested a paid-for program since 2018. CVS in the US launched CarePass that offers free pharmacy delivery and around-the-clock healthcare access. Another long-standing example is REI. REI, an American retailer, they sell equipment and gear for outdoor activities, so camping, hiking, skiing, all that sort of good stuff. And they've had a membership program for a very long time. In essence, REI is actually owned by its active members, and you pay a $30 lifetime membership fee. Every year, you're eligible to receive a dividend, essentially, on qualifying purchases you've made, which roughly equates to about 10% of what a member spends at REI on regular price merchandise in the prior year. But they also get lots of other benefits. They're allowed to buy returned, used or damaged goods at significant discounts in used gear sales, discounts on rentals, deals on shipping charges, adventure trips, shop services. There's rock wall access at locations that feature indoor climbing walls. They've got a whole bunch of extra benefits that tie in for just $30. And if you've paid that, why would you go anywhere else for that sort of equipment? So, one of the things I'm trying to do here is broaden the idea of what a loyalty program, quote unquote, could look like. If you can tick the boxes that I've talked about, if you can create a level of service and frictionless experience, if you can create some valuable rewards that has both depth and breadth, then maybe you can start to use the behavioural science principle of loss aversion and sunk costs to create a program that people will want to join, but more importantly will mean that they start their purchase journey with you rather than your competitor. And now on to Rob Recommends, which I mentioned in the intro. There's been some really interesting articles doing the rounds recently in relation to the concept of pricing. One of the 4 Ps, I'm sure everybody who's classically trained listening to this podcast would understand. There was a great article in Marketing Week published on the 13th of October of this year that essentially talked about a speech that Les Binet, co-author of Long and Short of It, and Adam and Eve DDB's Group Head of Effectiveness gave at the IPA's Global F-Works conference, talking about the concept of price promotion and the impact that it can have on a brand. And I think there's some really interesting quotes I just want to pick out. He said, "Price promotions on the face of it appear to be an incredibly powerful tool for stimulating sales. When you run a price promotion, you'll see a spike in sales, and most of the extra volume appears to come from that." But he claims that spike is an illusion, and it can be broken down into kind of 2 areas. One of those is that a big chunk of your promoted sales is just subsidizing existing sales. You would have got them anyway, you're just getting a discount and losing margin on those. Another chunk of those sales are just time shifted. You're bringing sales forward. You're getting extra sales this week at the expense of next week. And he talks about the concept of if you continue to do it, you're essentially increasing price sensitivity for your brand. You're reducing your pricing power and you're eroding your margins. And one of the things that I think is really interesting about this, and that Mark Ritson has talked about previously, is the obsession in marketing and actually brands in general with total revenue numbers and sales numbers rather than margin and profit. And one of the things that I always found fascinating when I worked in retail was the idea of, can we support a higher price? Do we have a strong enough brand to be able to support a higher price that we can continue to pay? Or do we feel like we quote unquote have to discount because our targets are built around revenue and built around sales numbers? And he also talks interestingly about measuring financial payback. And he talks about the idea of ROI and how dangerous optimizing against ROI can be. ROI essentially ignores the total net profit that you're making to a degree. You might have something with a lower ROI that costs you more money but that generates a higher incremental amount of profit than something that's got a great ROI but is only generating a very small amount of incremental profit. So he talks about optimizing net profit, not optimizing return on investment. It's well worth a read. I've put the link to it in the show notes. The other fascinating article on pricing talks about the concept of fictitious pricing, and again it ties into the idea of price promotions. But in this case, there's been a lot of talk about consumer class actions brought against the idea of fictitious pricing. Well, what is fictitious pricing? Essentially, fictitious pricing is saying that quote unquote sales and discounts offered by retailers are actually no such thing. They're fictitious because they're perpetual. You are always in sale. So if you're always in sale, that RRP that is discounting against, or that you're anchoring, to use another behavioural science term, that you're anchoring the discount against, is essentially not real, because things never get sold at 100% of price. This kind of idea has led to numerous lawsuits across the US, often resulting in multi-million-dollar settlements. And the article kind of talks about what fictitious pricing looked like, what kind of risks they can present, and how that risk can be mitigated through sensible marketing and advertising activities. It's a really fascinating article. It's a little noodly, gets a bit into the weeds occasionally, but it's certainly an interesting read for anybody who works in retail and is looking at price promotions and sales. Again, I've linked the article in the show notes. Well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. Next week, we return with another fascinating interview where we'll be talking about entrepreneurship and marketing on a small budget. I hope you tune in. Thank you very much for your time. And as my mother always says, take great care and be vigilant.